Welcome back. This week, we are going to talk about a topic that is a very common concern, very common issue that we deal with in working with patients, in working with couples and families, the issue of boundaries.
Right. Yeah, we talked a little bit about boundaries last week. We sort of touched on it. And we thought it'd be a good idea sort of to broaden the topic a little bit and talk about boundaries in general, because there still seems to be some confusion about exactly what boundaries are.
Absolutely. And it, boundaries, the term boundaries, the concept of boundaries is very popular, very common in popular press types of self-help books and things like that. But we're going to talk about it today, hopefully in a way that helps people understand what boundaries are, but also how to really think about it to overcome some of the common challenges that people experience when it comes to boundaries.
Right. And boundaries is one of those issues in the field of psychology or self-help that if you Google it or you go looking for it, you're going to find thousands, and there's advertisements and programs and tests and books and articles, thousands of them, just page after page of information, which is good in a way, but it also adds to the confusion because you get so many different perspectives. The problem seems to be that we get so much advice from professionals and friends and colleagues about exactly what boundaries are, that it starts to become unclear. Just what exactly do you mean by boundaries? Because you talk to one person or you read one professional and say, this is what boundaries are and this is what you should do. So there's a lot of confusion out there. So we want to sort through some of that and talk about and see if we can clarify some of the confusion, clear up some of the confusion about boundaries.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think that most people think, at least, that they know what boundaries are. Right. People say very, very directly, very clearly, I set this boundary, or, I think what we most commonly hear people say is talking about their boundaries being violated, their boundaries being crossed. Right. Again, I think it's important that we talk a little bit about, how to build and maintain your boundaries. But again, that perspective of, whose responsibility is it to maintain your boundaries? That's right. And so we'll spend some time talking about that.
Right. So the issue is you have to set, but also maintain.
Right.
And then that's a thoughtful, mindful process. Is first of all, you have to decide what are your boundaries. And we're talking about all of our boundaries: physical, sexual, emotional. So you have to set your boundaries, but you have to maintain your boundaries. And the reason we have boundaries is because if you don't have clear boundaries, you're going to have relationships where things like resentment and disappointment and anger build, and they get to some explosion, some point of ignition, because people are violating your boundaries. But the problem is you haven't set clear boundaries. Okay.
Right.
And so you get these other emotions that ruin your relationship. And the problem is not the other person. The problem is you haven't set clear boundaries for other people to know where they are and to respect those boundaries.
Right. So when we think about what boundaries are, there's a researcher out of Texas, Dr. Berney Brown, and she has really gained a lot of popularity because of her podcast or podcasts. She has 2 podcasts, and some of her books and things like that. But the way that she defines boundaries is pretty straightforward and simple. Boundaries are what we say are okay and what we say is not okay. So boundaries are just our differentiation between what's okay and what's not okay. And we set those boundaries in lots of different areas of our life, whether it's personal space. Some people are okay with hugging, other people are not okay with hugging. Our emotions, our thoughts, our expressions of things, our belongings, all of these things, are places where we set boundaries.
Right.
Again, what is okay and what is not okay.
Right. And I think you have to, and people need to be very thoughtful of each of these things. When you talk about personal space, what is your personal space? How do you protect it? What do you do about your possessions? Do you lend things out? Do you borrow things from other people? I tell them, I don't like to borrow things from people. I just don't like doing it. That's one of my boundaries. So I have to set that boundary. Time and energy boundaries.
Right.
How far do I go? What are my limits? When do I say no? If I have a busy weekend, it's a holiday weekend, Labor Day. And so you say, oh, I have Monday off. But maybe you want to conserve your energy.
Right.
So where are those boundaries? And then, of course, you have cultural boundaries, things you can't do, the religious boundaries, your ethical boundaries. We have professional ethics, so that sets up some boundaries for us. So you have to think about each of these areas and where are your boundaries in each one of these things, so that you can protect. I don't like the word protect. You're not protecting yourself. You're just making it clear to the rest of the world where your boundaries are. It's not for protection.
Right. No, it's not for protection. In fact, it's more related to our identity. It helps provide a sense of who we are, because if we know somebody that has really well-formed boundaries, we can say he's the type of person that, or he's a person who, and so we sort of, it becomes part of who that person's who that person is and how we see that person. But it also helps protect us from the perspective of stress. Right. Like you were saying, you're not necessarily one who will borrow things. Well, it can be a really stressful thing depending on the person's personality and temperament and everything. It can be really stressful if you borrow something from someone and then you're constantly thinking about, I got to make sure I remember to give that back. I got to make sure that that's not, it's not stolen or it's not damaged. And so, that can contribute to a lot of stress if you're the type of person who doesn't like that. My computer decided to make a sound. Thank you very much. So it's really a really interesting and important way in which we, identify who we are.
Right. Yeah. So we say, okay, why do we have boundaries? What do they give us? One is personal identity. And don't, you sometimes you appreciate when you say, no, this guy, if he says he's going to be there at 8 o'clock, you better be ready, because he's going to be there at 8 o'clock. And if you're not ready, he's going to go without you. Right. It's comforting in a way to know that, you say, okay, I know who he is. So boundaries give you a personal identity. They also, as you say, limit your exposure to stress. And then the third thing is it gives you agency. It gives you autonomy. You're saying to the world, this is who I am. Right. And it's and people get accustomed to the idea that this is who you are. And you do that by setting boundaries.
Absolutely. So when we're thinking about how we're going to set boundaries, like with so many other things in our lives, it's important to think about a Goldilocks approach, because if you set your boundaries too strict, too high of boundaries, too many boundaries, then you start closing yourself off from the rest of it. I mean, if you think about boundaries as walls that sort of separate what's okay from what's not okay, the more boundaries you have, and the more rigid those boundaries are, the more enclosed your life becomes.
That's right. Yeah, if they're too rigid, then if they're too rigid, you're more likely to keep everybody at a distance. If you think of boundaries as walls, as barriers, as fences, you're more likely to keep people out, which may not be what you really want to do.
Right. Absolutely. And so, because when you do that, it can make you feel detached from other people, including your partner. And it limits your close relationships and tend to avoid relationships because that concern that your boundaries are going to be challenged or problematic. So so it really creates a lot of limitations for you.
Right. And we all know people who say, I made these very strict boundaries, nobody gets, yeah, you're right. Nobody gets too close. And that creates another set of problems because you have few people who have boundaries that are too rigid, they don't have close relationships, they don't have intimate relationships. In fact, they avoid relationships because they don't want anybody getting in. So you don't want your boundaries to be too rigid.
Right. But there's also problems if they're too loose, of course, because then you become too involved with other people's problems, and you have really difficult times to if somebody's asking you for something or wanting you to do something. You maybe tend to take over other people's problems and kind of assume them as your own, and now you're adding to your stress and you're adding to your to-do list. When you probably don't have the time or the energy or the availability to do it, but you're taking it on anyways.
Right. Yeah. When your boundaries are too loose, and many of us suffer from boundaries that are a little too loose because you do things for fear that people won't like you or that people will reject you. So you do things that you really don't want to do just for fear of rejection. Well, that means your boundaries are a little bit too loose. You have to strengthen them in certain areas, because otherwise you're going to do things you don't want to do, and then you're going to end up resenting the person, and you're going to feel like you're being imposed upon. Well, it's not the other person who's imposing on you. It's because you haven't set a clear boundary in this area.
Absolutely. And so this is the way in which boundaries relate to esteem, like your self-esteem and your self-confidence. Because if you and you mentioned a minute ago about personal agency, if you don't have good agency, if you don't have good self-confidence, it's really difficult for you to set and identify and maintain boundaries, because you feel like maybe you're not worthy, or that you, again, like you said, that other people may reject you or not want to talk to you or spend time with you because of your boundary or something. And so they really loosen up when we maybe don't have the kind of confidence that we should have for ourselves.
That's right. Right. And, many of us are guilty of that. We say, well, I really don't want to do it, but, I kind of have to. No, you don't have to. You're allowed to set boundaries. Okay. What about healthy boundaries?
Yeah. Healthy boundaries are really good. And I think that it's really interesting, because we tend to think of some people as being, oh, that person should have really good boundaries. But many times those of us in the helping professions, we struggle with having healthy boundaries, because we work to help people so much that if we're not careful, we start to overhelp, help too much. And again, those boundaries kind of loosen a little bit. And so, we have to be really careful about that. But, with healthy boundaries, you tend to, sort of know how much information about yourself you should share, how much help you should provide to other people. You understand yourself well enough to know I can do this, or I shouldn't do that. So you have that healthy balance between, how much you're sharing and how much you're holding.
Right, right. And the other thing about healthy boundaries is that you understand your personal needs and your personal wants, and you know how to communicate them to other people. Okay, that's what healthy boundaries means, that you understand yourself. It's not fighting against other people. It's that you understand who you are and what your limits are.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And it's really a valuing of yourself. I'm important enough to be able to say no to this.
That's right.
My time is just as important as anybody else's time, or my privacy, my information is just as important as anybody else's information. And so I don't need to expose all of that just to get somebody to engage with me or to be interested in me.
Right. It struck me as we were preparing this, that you will frequently hear older individuals say, I've put up with this stuff all my life. I'm done. I don't have to do that anymore.
Right.
You don't ever have to do that.
Right.
You know, I hear people say all the time, I'm not going to any more dinners, or dances, or
right.
Family get, but it doesn't matter what it is. I'm not going to any more of those. I've done it all my life, and I hated it while I did it, and I'm never doing it again. Right. Well, you know, you can be 20 or 25 and say that. I mean, it's really okay. You know, if there's something you really don't, if you really don't like sporting events, then don't go to sporting events.
Right.
You don't have to wait until you're retired. You don't have to wait until you're 70 to look back and say, I'm not doing that. You're allowed to do that at 25.
Absolutely. And so those are some of the things that healthy boundaries really provide for us. And that, you know, it establishes what behavior that we'll accept from other people.
Right.
But also what behaviors other people can expect from us.
Exactly.
And so there's not that confusion, that ambiguity is just not there, because the boundaries help delineate that.
Right. Because if people know, if your friends know that you don't like to go on nature walks, they'll eventually stop asking you, which is better for everybody. They know that you don't want to go, and you're not imposed upon, and you're not made to feel guilty. They're not rejecting you. They just don't invite you on nature walks. Okay. Or they don't invite you to baseball games. They know you hate baseball. Bernie, would you like to go to a baseball game?
Thank you for asking.
No, you hate baseball.
Thank you for asking, but I would think
but it's too slow. You know, you like soccer, you like soccer because it's fast and exciting. Okay. Right. So I know not to invite you to a baseball game because it's not something you enjoy doing. But I know that because you've been very clear about that over the years.
Okay?
Right. But if I invite you to go see a professional soccer game in Berlin, you'd probably say yes. Yeah. I'll pay for everything, right?
Yes.
I'll pay. There you go. Right.
Yeah.
Right. So why? Because you have informed me over time that these are the things you prefer. These are the things you don't like. That's what boundaries do. They make life so much easier.
Right. Absolutely. But to be able to do that, we have to be able to maintain those boundaries, and we have to say, you know, because using your example, you know, if I really did not want to go to a baseball game, but I was worried about what you would think about me, and so you asked me, and I said, okay, you know, that would be great. Right. And I tried to fake it or whatever. You know, I'm going to go and I'm not going to have a good time, or it's going to, you know, there's going to be resentment, like you said earlier, some resentment that'll build up, because now I'm spending my time doing something that I'm not really interested in. I'm
worried. I know that you're not, I can tell that you're not enjoying yourself. Right. So then I start to worry about, oh, I shouldn't have done this. Then I feel guilty. That's the stress that we're talking about. Absolutely. So you avoid all that by having these clear, they don't have to be firm and hard boundaries, but they should be clear boundaries.
Right. Mm-hmm. And so when you're trying to learn and recognize the boundaries of other people, you want to look for some of those cues, some of those things that people say. Sometimes it's very upfront. You know, if somebody says, "Oh, I hate going to baseball games," it's a pretty good clue that that's a boundary. But you can also look for more subtle cues as to where those boundaries are. But sometimes you just have to ask the other person.
You're allowed to do that. Right?
You are allowed to do that.
Right. That's right. It's better than, you know, many of us, because we're a little insecure, people will invite us to do things that we don't want to do. And we'll come up with some excuse. Oh, I'd really like to, but I have to do my nails that night. Or I'd really like to, but, you know, my kids are sick. It's much easier. And over time, they'll get the message that every time you ask, you get some excuse. Okay. So eventually the other person says, oh, that must be a boundary. That must be something she doesn't really want to do. Wouldn't it be much easier to say, I don't go to baseball games?
Well, hopefully they'll interpret it that way. What many people will interpret that as is they just don't want to they don't want to spend time with me. They have a problem with me. And so they don't necessarily see it as a boundary. They see it as a personal issue. And
that's right.
Then you get into relational problems. You be perfectly fine and very, you know, really enjoy that relationship. But because you keep rejecting them, it's going to affect the relationship.
And they personalize it. Whereas if you said up front, I don't go to baseball games, then
Right.
it has nothing to do with me.
Right.
It's something that you do or do not like to do.
Right.
So that's where boundaries are so helpful. You know, they don't have to be a way of keeping people out of your life, but they clarify who you are.
Absolutely.
And it takes away all that other stuff that we struggle with.
Definitely. And so before we, one of the important things that we really need to talk about as it relates to this is as it relates to protecting your own personal space.
Right. That's
boundary.
right.
Because, you know, like we said at the beginning of the podcast, many times people will come in to sessions with us and they'll say, you know, well, my wife keeps violating my boundaries, or, you know, my friend keeps, you know, crossing my boundaries and asking me or trying to get me to do things that I don't want to do. And they are often surprised, I think, when we kind of share with them, no, we can't look at it that way.
Right.
Your boundaries are your responsibility.
That's right.
Other people don't cross your boundaries. You allow them to. You in that wall that is your boundary. If you put a door in that wall,
right,
let people through that door, that's you. That's on you. That's your responsibility. And so we have to shift that perspective, because and look at ways that we can protect our own personal space and maintain our boundaries, because that's our responsibility. That's right. We can't blame other people for crossing boundaries that we allow them to cross.
And it doesn't have to be an angry protection.
Sure, absolutely.
You have to clarify your own thinking and say, for example, I'm not a big fan of dinner parties where you go in and the meal is bring, you sit down and you talk, and you know, I just don't like doing that. I need to move around. I don't mind picnics because you can move around, but I don't like formal dinners because they're, you know. So I have to be clear about that.
Right.
I have to say, I don't do that. It's something that I just don't do. I'm not angry about it. I'm not saying, well, I have to protect my rights and I have to protect this and that. No, it's just, no, that's something I don't do. Thank you, but I don't do that.
Right. And I think that is a good word to use. You have the right to have your own preferences. You have the right to protect yourself.
Right.
Because you know, if you tell your partner, you know, I would like, you know, I had a really rough day. I would like to, can I just have, you know, 30 minutes to, you know, take a shower and kind of unwind. And as soon as you close the door, and they say, sure. And as soon as you close the door, there's knocks at the door, and the person, they're letting the kids in and all this okay, I asked you for this, you know, and it's, you know, I feel like I have the right to 30 minutes to unwind, because that's what's going to allow me to have a good rest of my evening with you guys. But if that is constantly violated, if it's constantly crossed, you have to have a choice of how you're going to respond to that. You can say, okay, come on in and, you know, let them cross that boundary. Or you can say, no, I asked for this time. You were cool with this time. So I'm going to ask you guys to wait for 30 minutes and then I'll talk with you and I'll be out at that time. But it's up to you to maintain that. And you have a right to do that.
And again, it doesn't have to be done defensively. It doesn't have to be done with any frustration, with any anger. You just have to be firm and say, no, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I need to do right now. Okay? Right. And that's okay. If somebody did that to you, you'd be fine with it. Sure. If somebody said to you, I need 30 minutes, I'd say, fine, that's great. Okay. Rather than letting me in and resenting my presence.
Absolutely. And then if I did something that violated what it is that I granted them or that I agreed with them, and they said, hey, you know, I thought that you said that I could have this time. You know what? You're absolutely right. I wasn't even recognizing that's what I was doing. Sorry about that. Well, let's start the time over. And, you know, but that's communication that helps relationships to be healthy.
Right.
So it is important that we know our rights, you know, because we all have individual rights that we all share.
That's right. And that's when we talk about how do you determine your boundaries, one of them is What are your rights? Well, you have a right to privacy. You have a right to a schedule. You have a right to of your personal space. You have a right to decide who touches you and who doesn't touch you. There are certain rights that all of us have. Okay?
Right.
So setting of boundaries is thinking about the rights that you have. I have a right to relax. I have a right to go to bed when it's my bedtime. These are rights that all of us have. Okay.
Right. Yeah. And we have the right to say no without
Yeah.
having to feel guilty about it.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
We
Yeah.
have the
And
right.
then also trust your gut.
Yeah.
So how do I set a boundary? Well, if somebody asks me to do something and I get all twisted up inside, it's probably a pretty clear signal that that's something I don't want to do. And so you have to trust your instincts, trust your gut, trust your feelings. And if you start to get these body sensations that something's just not quite right, you have to trust that. You have to trust your gut.
Right. Absolutely.
And you have to know your values. The third thing is you got to know your values. What are your values?
Absolutely.
Is this something that's within your value system or not?
Right. And so when it comes to values, you do want to be a little bit careful, right? Because you can't have so many. Maybe it sounds weird to say it this way. You don't want to have so many values that, again, it becomes these walls that close you in so small that nobody else can be around. If you have a particular religious value, for example, a particular religious perspective, and you tell yourself that I'm not going to talk to anybody else unless they have this same value,
right?
Well, you're closing yourself off to probably most of the population.
That's right.
Right. So you do have to be careful when you're thinking about those values and how you're going to then enforce them as part of your boundaries.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And again, you don't have to be offensive.
Right.
And many people are. Well, I never do that. You can tolerate other people. It doesn't mean it does. You can still have boundaries and still be tolerant of other people.
Right.
Okay?
Absolutely.
It's not that you have to shove everybody who doesn't share your values out of your life. You just have to know what your values are.
Absolutely. And it's the nature of how we form relationships, because if you, there are those who share a lot of the same values and views and perspectives with you. That relationship is going to be very different than with a person who maybe only shares one or two values and preferences with you. And that's okay. You can have a different relationship with this person versus a relationship with this person. Those relationships can be very different, and that's okay. And they're partially based upon where your boundaries are. You're not going to be able to have the same level of relationship with everyone in your life. It's not going to work that way.
Exactly, because you may have different boundaries in different locations.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
And so so you talk about your basic rights. Okay. And one of the great sentences that I stumbled on when doing this, so we talk about the right to say no. Okay, that's a right that all of us have. Somebody wrote, "No is a complete sentence."
Right.
You don't have to add anything. You don't have to add anything. I never thought of it that way. But no is a complete sentence. You don't have to justify. You don't have to rationalize. You don't have to explain. No says it all. No it's a no. It's what we do with children. No. Because when you start justifying it, you say, "No, I don't have time." And then the person can say, like a good salesman, "Oh, no, we can make time." "No, I'm not here." "No, we can take care of that." So the more you try to explain, the more you open yourself to persuasion. And so just leave it at no.
Yeah. Okay. Even if the other person pushing for more information, for more of an explanation, now that's where you're getting into a situation where they're starting to work to cross that boundary. And so that's where your choice is. No, I'm not going to be able to do that. Right. Okay. But why? What's going on? I'm just not going to be able to go. Maybe we can do it a different time, or maybe we can think of something else to do another weekend. Well, what are you doing this weekend? I'm just not going to be able to go. And you can stick to that without allowing that boundary to be crossed. But again, that's on you. That's our responsibility to maintain our boundary.
Yeah, and if you're prone to that kind of thing, then you need to think about that, give it some thought, say, okay, how can I protect myself from being persuaded to do things, being talked into things that I don't really want to do?
Right.
Okay. And that's what we talk about, being mindful. All right. So you have a right to say no. You have to trust your gut. And the third one is, what are your values? And one of the interesting activities that you might want to do when it comes to your values, one author said, well, first of all, make a list of 10 things that you believe in. Okay. These are 10 values that I hold. Okay. And then he said, narrow that 10 to 5. Mm-hmm. And you can even narrow that 5 to 3. These are the things. So these are the 3 or 4 or 5 values that are truly important to you. Okay. Then you can build boundaries based on those values. Right. But again, you've given it thought. You've thought about it. You've been mindful, and you're very clear in your own mind. Where are my values? Okay. Right. I think drinking is one of those things that it's one of those ambivalent areas where you say, well, there are many people who I don't drink, and I don't want to be around anybody who does drink. Right. Well, you can be around me because I don't drink to excess. We can still have a relationship. I'm not violating any of your boundaries. I'm not going to get drunk. I'm not going to become obnoxious. I'm not going to invade your space. So you can be with me even though I might have a drink or two. Okay. So clarify your values, but do it in a very mindful way. Don't just say, well, I'm not going to associate with anybody who drinks. A lot of people drink in moderation, and they're nice to be with.
Right. Absolutely. And when you start thinking about the number of people that you start cutting out of your life, when you see some of those really so rigid boundaries based upon some of those values, you start really getting into problems of carving up your life in such a way that you're living in this very narrow area, that restricts you.
That's right.
So
that's right. And because if you start saying, well, I'm not going to associate with this person or this person or this person or this person, you not only narrow your focus down to just a handful of people, but you're also missing out on what these other people might add to your life. Right. It might be this group that helps you move your furniture when the time comes. Okay. They may bring other things to your life. When you're sick, they may be the ones who stay with you and don't talk, and they just sit there and are true volunteers. Okay. So you're leaving people out that you may really want to be involved in your life.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So
the goal is
to set without offending.
Setting without offending is that's the key to this thing. How do you set your boundaries and maintain them without offending others?
Right. And one of the first ways or best ways to do that is being assertive through the use of I statements.
Right.
Make it, you have to be personal for yourself about it. It's not, you make me angry when you do this. Okay. Mm-hmm. That's all about that person. You don't make me angry.
Right.
I get angry.
Right.
You don't make me angry.
Right.
And so you have to make it into I statements,
That's right.
Make it about yourself.
Right. I get angry when you do that. Now you're said to the other person, you've been very clear about how you feel. I get angry. I get sad. I get cheerful, whatever, when you blank. Now you've been very clear about yourself to the other person. Now it's up to the other person to decide if they want to do anything about that.
Right.
I've said to you what bothers me. Now, and you don't have to say that, but now it's up to the other person to decide what they're going to do about your feelings.
Right. And or how they're going to respond to that. Because if I say, I get angry when you interrupt me, mm-hmm. or I get angry when I'm interrupted, what I'm telling you that I'm going to get angry if that happens. Now, if you do that again, or if you continue to do that, then I'm going to get angry because I'm telling you that this is how I will respond to that. Right. But again, it's I'm taking ownership of that. Mm-hmm. I can't stop you. I can't make you do anything.
Right.
But I can tell you how I'm going to respond or how I might respond in that kind of circumstance.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And
I'm being clear. Right? I'm being clear about where my boundary is, how you make me feel. In other words, I'm not blaming you for this. Right. It's not you doing this to me. I'm telling you how it makes me feel when you do that. Okay, now it's up to you. Now it's up to the other person. And if the other person cares enough about you or the relationship, they will at least consider your request. They may not change, but at least they know what your expectation is. That's being clear. So I statements are very effective ways to make your boundaries known to other people.
Right.
Okay?
And again, it will be on you to maintain that, so that if that person continues to do that, they don't respect what you're telling them, and they don't make any adjustments, or they continue to try to violate that, then you have a decision to make. Do I want to continue to interact with this person who's going to continue to try to press my boundaries, or do I change my boundary?
Right.
You know,
exactly.
That's your choice. That's really the only choice you have.
Right.
I guess the third choice is to let it to feel like you're keeping your boundary and letting the person violate it, so that you just keep getting angry. I guess the third option.
Right.
But that's it. That's what you got.
Right. Exactly. But again, it's yours.
Right.
The thing about boundaries is it's your way of telling the world, this is who I am. These are the things that I'll do. These are things I don't do. These are things I value. These are things I don't value. It clarifies who I am. Right. And it makes me, it puts me in charge of my life. Right. And then I'm not imposed on by other people.
Right. Absolutely.
I've had many people who have, I'm sure we all do. We all have people who impose themselves on us, and we always resent it.
Right.
You know, even if we go along, we always resent it. Well, resentment is not healthy, you know, so do what you need to do to avoid becoming resentful.
Absolutely. Now we've talked about the importance of saying no. And again, I like what you said about that no is a complete sentence. Right. But another way that we sort of set our boundaries without offending others is really just our own our own things that we can do to safeguard our spaces, our space, our time, our possessions. Again, it's on us to safeguard those things.
Right.
If you want to spend the afternoon just kind of vegging out on the couch and watching Netflix, if I then ask you to come to work and do something, or come help me move or something like that, what you do with that time is your business. So if you say yes, even though you don't really want to, I'm not violating that boundary. You're loosening that boundary. You're putting a door in that wall.
You're loosening the boundary. You had a firm boundary, but you've loosened it a little bit. There's nothing wrong with that. Right. And sometimes you may want to do it, but what you need to know is you're doing that. You're loosening the boundary.
Right. And that goes back to if you said no, you have the right to say no without feeling guilty.
Right.
You can say no. All right. Well, no, thanks. You don't want to feel guilty about it later that, I just sat home and watched Netflix all day. You might have had a really long, hard work week, and you just need time to recuperate. That's fine.
Right. You know that phrase, you say possessions, if you don't want to lend your stuff to other people, then you can say no. And it's very simple. You say, no, I'll tell you why. I've lent things to other people and they come back broken, or they don't get returned, or, I have just found it easier not to lend possessions to other people. And then that's the end of the discussion. It's not personal. It's not that I don't like you.
Right.
Okay? It's not that I don't trust you. It's that it's just something I don't do. I don't lend my stuff to other people.
Right.
Okay? And that's all it takes. And then it's not personal. I'm just like this with everybody.
Absolutely.
Okay? All right. And you have to do the same thing with time. Yeah. Protect your time. If you need alone time, if you need vacation time, if you need time to go through emails or not go through emails, you have to be able to say, I'm not going to go through email. Monday is a holiday. And if you decide not to work that day, you can put up a banner that says, I will be out of the office on September the 6th.
Yeah.
Okay. So people know not to expect anything from you that day. All right. We have bled work time and personal time. There are people who they don't have a distinction anymore. Right. They're available 7 days a week, and they're available when they're on vacation. they're always available via email. And you have to, again, it's a boundary you need to think about and you need to set.
Absolutely.
There's a wonderful movie that has Robin Williams in it. And they're in a camper. I've forgotten the name of the movie, but all through this family camping trip, he's in touch with his employer because they're trying to get this contract. And the whole movie is about, he's supposed to be on vacation, but he's sneaking around doing business. It works out in the end, but it's a wonderful look at this mixing work life with family life.
Absolutely. If you're having a hard time with any of this, hard time saying no, a hard time protecting those boundaries or protecting your time and possessions and things, get some help. It is a skill that can be built. So get a coach, get a therapist, get a support person going to help you make some of those decisions and work through how to be more assertive with that. Right.
And this is a wonderful time to work with a professional, somebody who understands these boundary issues, because it is a skill. There's nothing wrong with you. It's not, you don't have a diagnosis or anything. You just need a little help. So you're not getting therapy as such. You're getting, you have a mentor, you have a coach, you have somebody who's going to help you. If you wanted to go learn how to hit a backhand in tennis, you go hire somebody like a coach. Well, this is the same thing. This is a skill you need to learn. So you're not going to therapy. You're going to a coach. Think of it as a coach to learn this skill that you don't possess or that you want to improve.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple of links in the show notes that will give you some more information, kind of share a little bit about some of the things that we talked about. But think about your boundaries. Think about what you want your boundaries, where you want your boundaries to be set. Be thoughtful about it. Weigh in. Your values and, your relationships and weigh in all those things. But when you set your boundaries, do it mindfully and do it, thoughtfully.
Right. They're your boundaries. Right. You have a right to set them where they need to be for you. Who are you? Where do you want your boundaries to be? And then just maintain those gently. They don't have to be maintained with any vigor or anger or frustration. Just know who you are. Learn to say no. It's okay to say no. I would rather, and I'm sure everybody agrees, I would rather somebody say no, just no, and then it's clear, than to do something that they don't really want to do and then to resent me for it.
Absolutely. Definitely. All right. Well, I think that's it for today then. Until next time, enjoy your holidays, everyone. But
yes.
Until next time, stay happy, stay healthy, and forget to be afraid.